The kitchen smelled like garlic and rosemary. Steam rose from the stove in soft curls, catching the warm light from the pendant lamps hanging above the marble counter. Ramon stood at the stove, his back to Monique, stirring something in a copper pot with careful, deliberate movements. He hummed quietly, some tune she didn't recognize. His shoulders relaxed beneath his light blue button-down shirt. From where she sat at the small breakfast nook by the window, Monique watched him with what anyone else might have mistaken for contentment. The scene was perfect, almost aggressively perfect. The kind of domestic harmony that belonged in a magazine spread about successful couples who had figured out the secret to happiness. But Monique wasn't feeling content. She was feeling numb. Her fingers traced the rim of her wine glass, the Chardonnay inside catching the light like liquid gold. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of building a life together, of shared dreams and whispered promises in the dark. 6 years of believing that what they had was real. And now, sitting in their tastefully decorated apartment, with its open floor plan and carefully chosen furniture, she felt like she was watching a play. Ramon was performing the role of devoted husband, and she, until very recently, had been playing the trusting wife. The phone on the counter buzzed. It was a small sound, barely audible over the sizzle of whatever Ramon was cooking. But to Monique, it might as well have been a gunshot. Her eyes shifted from her wine glass to the device lying face up on the white marble, just 3 feet away from where Ramon stood. The screen lit up with a notification, bright and accusatory in the dimming evening light. She couldn't see the full message from where she sat, but she could see enough. A name, Riley, and the preview of a text that made her stomach clench with a familiar, sickening recognition. "Hey, babe, I miss you so much. Can't wait to..." The rest was cut off by the character limit of the notification preview. Ramon didn't turn around. He kept stirring, kept humming, completely oblivious, or perhaps willfully ignorant. The phone's screen dimmed after a few seconds, then went dark, taking the message with it. But the damage was done. That brief glimpse had been enough. Monique set her wine glass down with exaggerated care, worried that if she gripped it any tighter, it might shatter in her hand. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her temples, behind her eyes. Every muscle in her body screamed at her to stand up, to grab that phone, to throw it at his head and demand answers, to scream, to cry, to make him look at her and explain how he could stand there cooking dinner, pretending everything was normal, while messages like that arrived from another woman. But she didn't move, because this wasn't the first time. This was just the confirmation. For months now, maybe longer, Monique had felt it, that subtle shift in the atmosphere of their marriage, like a change in air pressure before a storm. Little things at first. Ramon coming home later than usual, always with reasonable explanations about traffic or last-minute meetings, the way he'd started keeping his phone face down on surfaces, when before he'd never cared. The new cologne that had appeared in their bathroom, expensive and musky, different from what he usually wore. When she'd asked about it, he'd said one of the guys at work had recommended it, said he was tired of smelling the same way for years. Then there were the credit card statements. Monique handled most of their finances, a responsibility Ramon had been happy to hand over years ago, claiming he hated dealing with numbers. She'd noticed charges that didn't make sense. Dinners at restaurants they'd never been to together. A purchase from a jewelry store for $750, 3 weeks before her birthday. She'd gotten excited initially, thinking he was planning something special. But her birthday had come and gone with nothing more than a card and flowers from the grocery store. When she'd casually asked about the jewelry store charge, Ramon had looked at her with such convincing confusion that she'd almost believed him when he said it must have been a fraudulent charge. He'd even called the credit card company in front of her, reported it, got it reversed. She'd wanted to believe him. God, how desperately she'd wanted to believe him. But then she'd found the receipt. Crumpled in the pocket of a jacket he'd asked her to take to the dry cleaners. A receipt from that same jewelry store, dated exactly when the charge had appeared, for a white gold bracelet with a small diamond charm. $749.99, plus tax. Monique had never received that bracelet. She'd put the receipt back in the pocket, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fold it. She'd taken the jacket to the dry cleaners like he'd asked. And she'd said nothing. Because acknowledging it would make it real, and making it real would mean having to do something about it. So instead, she'd started paying attention. Really paying attention. She'd noticed the way he showered as soon as he got home from work, every single day without fail. The way his eyes would light up when his phone buzzed, then immediately dim when he saw it was just a notification from some app or a message from a friend. The way he'd stopped initiating intimacy with her, and when she initiated, he'd go through the motions with a distraction in his eyes that made her feel more alone than if he'd just rejected her outright. 3 weeks ago, she'd been looking for the spare car keys in his nightstand drawer when she'd found a folded piece of paper. Just a simple note, written in unfamiliar handwriting, with little hearts dotted above the eyes. Last night was amazing. You make me feel things I've never felt before. R. Not Monique. R for someone else. Someone who apparently made her husband feel things. She'd photographed the note with her phone before putting it back exactly as she'd found it. Added it to the growing folder of evidence she'd been collecting without fully admitting to herself why she was collecting it. And then, last week, she'd found hair. Long blonde hair on the passenger seat of Ramon's car. Monique's hair was brown with honey-colored highlights, and it barely touched her shoulders. This hair was different, lighter, longer. She'd held it up to the light coming through the car window, this single strand of proof that someone else had been in her husband's car. Someone who sat in the passenger seat. Someone who probably laughed at his jokes and touched his arm and made him feel young and exciting. She'd saved that hair too. Put it in a small Ziploc bag like she was collecting evidence for a crime. Which, in a way, she supposed she was. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't just another small piece of a larger puzzle. Tonight was the picture complete, the truth undeniable. Because the name on that phone screen, Riley, wasn't new to Monique. She'd heard Ramon mention that name before. Riley Hartman, the new intern at his office. So bright, so eager to learn, so full of fresh ideas. Ramon had talked about Riley with an enthusiasm that had made something twist uncomfortably in Monique's gut even then. But she'd pushed the feeling down, told herself she was being paranoid, that Riley was probably just some kid fresh out of college who Ramon was mentoring. Except Riley wasn't texting him about work projects. Riley was texting him with words like babe and miss you, and God only knew what else was in the messages that Monique hadn't seen yet. Ramon turned from the stove, finally, holding a wooden spoon. He smiled at her. That same warm smile that had made her fall in love with him 9 years ago. Back when they'd both been different people with different dreams. Back when she'd believed that smile was only for her. "Dinner's almost ready," he said, his voice casual and light. "I made that chicken dish you love, the one with the lemon and thyme. And I picked up a bottle of that Chardonnay from the wine shop on 5th Street, the one you said you wanted to try." He'd remembered. Of course he'd remembered. That was the cruelest part of all of this. He was still attentive in so many ways, still thoughtful about the little things. It would have been easier if he'd been obviously neglectful, if he'd stopped caring altogether. But Ramon was too smart for that. He maintained the facade beautifully, seasoning his betrayal with just enough genuine kindness to keep her off balance. "That's sweet of you," Monique heard herself say, and she was almost impressed by how normal her voice sounded, how completely it masked the chaos raging inside her chest. Ramon turned back to the stove, and Monique's eyes went immediately to his phone, still lying there on the counter. Dark and silent now, but full of secrets. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could wait until he went to the bathroom, grab the phone, read everything, confront him right here, right now, in this kitchen that smelled like garlic and betrayal. She could throw her wine glass at the wall and watch it shatter, watch his carefully constructed performance crumble along with it. But then what? He would deny it, or he would confess, and either way, it would be over. The marriage would end in this kitchen on a random Wednesday evening, with half-cooked chicken on the stove and unopened wine on the counter. And some small, stubborn part of Monique wasn't ready for it to end like that. Not with him in control of the narrative, not with her as the hysterical wife who couldn't handle the truth. No, if this marriage was going to end, and she was increasingly certain that it was going to end on her terms, an idea began to form in her mind. Dangerous, possibly insane, but satisfying in a way that a simple confrontation could never be. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she watched Ramon's back, watched the way he moved around their kitchen with such casual comfort, so secure in his deception. He thought he was clever, thought he'd covered his tracks well enough, thought his wife was too trusting, too comfortable, too dependent on their shared life to ever question him seriously. He was wrong. Monique picked up her wine glass and took a slow sip, her mind already working through the details of what she was about to do. Her heart was still pounding, but it wasn't just anger anymore. It was something else, something colder and sharper. Determination. "I'm going to use the bathroom real quick," she said, standing up from the breakfast nook with her wine glass still in hand. Ramon glanced over his shoulder, nodded with that same easy smile. "Sure, babe. Dinner will be ready in about 10 minutes. Babe. The same word Riley had used in that text message, the casual endearment that he tossed around so freely, giving it to both his wife and his mistress like it meant nothing, like the word itself was as empty as their marriage vows had apparently become. Monique walked past him, her footsteps quiet on the hardwood floor. As she passed the counter, she let her free hand trail along the marble surface, her fingers stopping just inches from his phone. She could feel his presence just a few feet away, could smell the cologne that some other woman had probably recommended, could hear him humming again as he stirred whatever sauce he was making. She didn't take the phone. Not yet. That would be too obvious, too risky. Ramon would notice immediately, and the whole plan forming in her mind would fall apart before it even began. Instead, she continued to the bathroom, closed the door behind her, and stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back at her had brown hair with honey highlights that caught the light, hazel eyes that had seen too much in the past few months, and a face that somehow managed to look calm despite everything churning beneath the surface. She was 39 years old, successful in her career as a marketing director, educated, intelligent, and until very recently, she'd thought she was happily married. How had she missed it? Or rather, how had she let herself miss it for so long? All those little signs, those tiny red flags that she'd explained away, or ignored because acknowledging them would have meant admitting that her marriage was a lie, that the man she'd built a life with, the man she'd trusted completely, was capable of this kind of betrayal. But she knew now, and unlike Ramon, who thought he was getting away with something, Monique wasn't going to waste this knowledge. She was going to use it. She set her wine glass on the bathroom counter and pulled out her phone. Her hands were steadier now, her breathing more controlled. She opened her messages and scrolled to her conversation with Vivian Dougherty, her best friend since college. Vivian was a divorce attorney, though Monique had never imagined she'd need her friend's professional expertise for her own marriage. She typed quickly, "Are you free tonight? I need to talk. It's important." The response came back almost immediately, 3 dots appearing, and then Vivian's message. "Of course. Everything okay?" Monique stared at that question for a long moment. Everything okay? What a loaded question. What an impossibly complicated thing to answer. She typed back, "Not really, but it will be." Another immediate response. Come over whenever. I'll open wine. The good stuff. Monique smiled, a small, genuine expression of gratitude. Whatever happened next, at least she wouldn't be alone in it. She tucked her phone back into her pocket and looked at herself in the mirror again. The same face, the same eyes, but something had shifted. Something fundamental had changed in the space between discovering that text message and this moment standing in her bathroom making plans. She was done being the oblivious wife. Done making excuses for behavior that had no excuse. Done letting Ramon control the narrative of their relationship while she played along, pretending not to notice the cracks spreading through the foundation of their marriage. But she wasn't going to confront him tonight. Not directly. Because Monique had realized something crucial in the past few minutes. Ramon's phone was right there on the counter. His attention was entirely focused on cooking dinner, on maintaining this performance of domestic bliss. And she knew his passcode. Of course she knew it. It was their wedding anniversary. 08/03/2016. August 3rd, 2016. The day they'd promised to love each other forever. The irony was almost poetic. Monique took a deep breath, picked up her wine glass, and opened the bathroom door. She could hear Ramon in the kitchen, still humming, still completely unaware that his carefully constructed double life was about to come crashing down around him. Just not in the way he might have expected if he'd ever bothered to consider the possibility of getting caught. She walked back to the kitchen, with purpose now, each step deliberate. Ramon had his back to her again, transferring chicken from a pan to a serving dish. The phone sat exactly where it had been before, waiting. "Need any help?" Monique asked, keeping her voice light and casual. "Nah, I got it," Ramon replied without turning around, just grabbing plates. "Could you get the silverware, though?" "Sure." This was it. The silverware drawer was right next to where his phone lay on the counter. Monique moved to the drawer, opened it with her left hand, while her right hand moved with practiced casualness toward the phone. Her fingers closed around it, and for a second, her heart stopped. This was the moment. If he turned around right now, if he saw her holding his phone, everything would explode immediately. But he didn't turn around. He was too focused on arranging the chicken just right on the serving platter, too confident in his own deception to imagine that his wife might be doing some deceiving of her own. Monique's thumb moved to the home button. The screen lit up, asking for a passcode, 08/03/2016. She entered it quickly, her fingers surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The phone unlocked, and there it was. His message app, with a red notification bubble showing unread messages. She opened it, and Riley Hartman's name was right at the top of the conversation list. Monique tapped it, and a waterfall of messages appeared. Weeks' worth of conversations. Months, maybe. She scrolled up quickly, her eyes scanning the words that confirmed every suspicion, every fear, every late-night worry that she'd tried to convince herself was just paranoia. "Miss you already. Last night was incredible. When can I see you again? I can't stop thinking about you." And Ramon's responses, equally damning. "You're all I think about. Soon, I promise. Being with you makes me feel alive again. Alive again." As if their marriage, their life together, was death by comparison. Monique's vision blurred for a second, tears threatening to break through the controlled facade she'd been maintaining. But she blinked them back, forced herself to focus. This wasn't the time for grief. This was the time for action. She scrolled down to the most recent message, the one that had appeared while she sat at the breakfast nook watching her husband cook. "Hey, babe. I miss you so much. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I've been thinking about you all day. You make me so happy." Tomorrow. They had plans to meet tomorrow. While Monique would be at work, trusting that her husband was also at work, he'd actually be with Riley, doing God only knew what, feeling alive. An idea struck her. Wild, reckless, absolutely perfect. Her fingers moved across the screen before she could second-guess herself. She deleted Riley's most recent message first, making sure Ramon wouldn't see it when he eventually checked his phone. Then she composed a response, typing as Ramon, her heart pounding so hard she was amazed he couldn't hear it across the kitchen. "Hey, beautiful. Change of plans. Can you come over tonight instead? My wife has plans with her friend. She won't be home. Would love to see you." She read it over once, twice, making sure it sounded like something Ramon would write, casual enough to seem normal, but enticing enough that Riley would jump at the opportunity. Then, before she could lose her nerve, she hit send. The message showed as delivered immediately. 3 dots appeared almost instantly as Riley began typing a response. Monique watched them. These 3 little dots that represented her husband's mistress on the other end, eager and unsuspecting. The response came through, "Really? Tonight? That would be amazing. What time?" Monique typed back, "Come around 8. That'll give me time to clean up after dinner. I'll send you the address." "Can't wait. See you soon, babe." Monique quickly followed up with another message containing their home address. The same address that was on their mortgage, their tax documents, their wedding invitations from 6 years ago. She was inviting her husband's mistress to their home, to the apartment they'd furnished together, where they'd celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and quiet Sunday mornings. The audacity of what she was doing should have frightened her. Maybe it would, later. But right now, all Monique felt was a cold, crystalline clarity. She took screenshots of the conversation, sent them to her own phone using Ramon's messaging app, then carefully deleted the evidence of sending those screenshots. She cleared the recent messages from Riley, leaving just enough of their earlier conversation to seem normal if Ramon glanced at his phone, but not so much that he'd notice the new messages were missing. Then she set the phone back down on the counter, exactly where it had been, and picked up the silverware from the drawer as if nothing had happened. The entire operation had taken less than 2 minutes. "Got them," she said, her voice somehow steady as she carried forks and knives to the small dining table they usually ate at. Ramon turned around, finally, carrying the serving dish with the chicken. He'd arranged it beautifully, garnished with fresh herbs and lemon slices, the kind of presentation that would have made her smile and kiss his cheek and tell him he was wonderful, back when she'd believed that these gestures meant something real. "Perfect timing," he said, setting the dish on the table. "This is going to be delicious." Monique looked at him, really looked at him, at the man she'd married, the man she'd trusted with her heart and her future and her faith. He looked the same as he always had. Same dark hair starting to gray at the temples, same brown eyes, same slight dimple in his left cheek when he smiled. But she saw him differently now, saw the lie beneath the charm, the selfishness beneath the thoughtfulness. "I'm sure it will be," she said, and sat down at the table. Ramon sat across from her, serving her a generous portion before serving himself. He poured wine into both their glasses, the good Chardonnay from the wine shop on 5th Street. He raised his glass in a toast. "To us," he said, his smile warm and genuine-looking. "To many more years of happiness together." Monique clinked her glass against his, the sound sharp and clear in their quiet apartment. "To us," she echoed, and took a sip. The wine was excellent, crisp and bright with notes of apple and pear. Ramon had remembered correctly. This was exactly the kind of wine she liked. It would have been touching if it wasn't so completely overshadowed by everything else. They ate in relative silence, just the sounds of silverware against plates, and the occasional comment about the food, which really was delicious. Ramon had always been a good cook, better than Monique. She'd teased him about it before, calling him her personal chef. He'd liked that, had enjoyed taking care of her in that way. Or at least, she'd thought he enjoyed it. Now she wondered if it was just another part of the performance, another way to keep her satisfied and unsuspecting, while he lived an entirely separate life with someone else. The clock on the wall showed 7:23, just 37 minutes until Riley would arrive at their door. expecting to find Ramon alone and ready to welcome her. 37 minutes until Monique's careful plan would either work perfectly or explode catastrophically in her face. But she was ready. Whatever happened, she was ready. Ramon's phone buzzed on the counter. His eyes flicked toward it instinctively. That little tell that Monique had noticed so many times before. The way his attention would sharpen whenever his phone made a sound, as if every notification might be something important. Or rather, someone important. "You should check that," Monique said, keeping her voice light. "Might be work." Ramon hesitated, then stood up and walked to the counter. He picked up his phone, unlocked it with that same passcode, their wedding anniversary, and looked at the screen. Monique watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of concern or suspicion. But there was nothing. Just a quick glance, a dismissive shrug. "Nothing important," he said, setting the phone back down. "Just some notification from an app." He was lying. Monique could see Riley's name on the screen from where she sat, could see that there was a message waiting. But Ramon had looked at it, seen whatever response Riley had sent most recently, and chosen not to mention it, chosen to sit back down at the table with his wife and continue this charade as if nothing was happening. The confirmation of his deception, even though she already knew, still stung, still made something twist painfully in her chest. But Monique kept her face neutral, kept eating her dinner like everything was normal. Like her world hadn't completely shifted on its axis in the space of one evening. "The chicken really is delicious," she said, and meant it. It was delicious. Ramon had outdone himself. Too bad he'd never get the chance to cook for her again. They finished dinner with the kind of small talk that married couples fall into after years together. Ramon mentioned something about a project deadline at work, conveniently leaving out any mention of the intern who was apparently helping him with it. Monique nodded in the right places, asked appropriate questions, played her part flawlessly. She told him about her day at the marketing firm, about the difficult client who kept changing their mind about the campaign direction, about her boss who was considering her for a promotion to senior director. Ramon smiled and said he was proud of her, said she deserved the promotion, said all the right things while his phone sat on the counter, full of messages to another woman. The clock ticked toward 8, 7:45, 7:50. Each minute felt impossibly long and impossibly short at the same time. Monique's heart beat faster as the appointed time approached, but outwardly she remained calm. She helped Ramon clear the dishes, rinsed plates while he loaded the dishwasher, this domestic routine they'd perfected over 6 years of marriage. "I was thinking," Ramon said as he wiped down the counter, "maybe we could watch that documentary you mentioned, the one about the national parks." Monique almost laughed. He wanted to watch television, wanted to settle onto their couch together like a normal couple on a normal evening, completely unaware that his mistress was currently on her way to their apartment. The absurdity of it was almost beautiful. "Actually," Monique said, drying her hands on a kitchen towel, "I think I might call Vivian. See if she wants to grab drinks or something. We haven't caught up in a while." Ramon's face showed the briefest flash of something relief, maybe before settling back into casual disappointment. "Oh, okay. That sounds nice. Girls' night?" "Something like that." Monique pulled out her phone, made a show of texting Vivian, even though she'd already arranged everything earlier. "She says she's free. I might head over there around 8. Perfect timing. She'd be leaving right when Riley would be arriving." The synchronicity was almost poetic. Ramon nodded, trying to look supportive, even though Monique could see the excitement dancing behind his eyes. His wife would be out of the apartment. He'd have the place to himself. Except, of course, he thought he'd be alone. Thought he could maybe call Riley, invite her over now that his schedule had unexpectedly cleared. He had no idea that conversation had already happened, that the invitation had already been extended, that his two worlds were about to collide in the most spectacular way possible. "That's great, babe," Ramon said, and there was that word again, babe, the word that meant everything and nothing. "You should go have fun. I'll probably just watch some TV, maybe catch up on work emails. Lies. Such easy, casual lies. Monique went to their bedroom, ostensibly to grab her purse and freshen up before meeting Vivian. But instead of actually preparing to leave, she texted her friend, "Change of plans. Don't wait up for me. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Trust me on this." Vivian's response was immediate. "Are you sure you're okay? This is starting to worry me." "I'm more than okay. I'm taking control. I'll call you later tonight with details. Be careful, whatever you're doing." Monique smiled at her phone. Careful? She was being the opposite of careful. She was being reckless and dangerous and possibly crazy. But she'd been careful for months. And where had that gotten her? She'd carefully collected evidence, carefully avoided confrontation, carefully maintained the illusion of normalcy, while her marriage rotted from the inside. No more being careful. She checked her appearance in the bedroom mirror. Her makeup was still intact from work, her hair still styled. She looked put together, professional, completely in control. Good. She wanted to look perfect for what was about to happen. The clock on the nightstand showed 7:58. Monique grabbed her purse and walked back to the living room where Ramon was already settling onto the couch with the remote control. He looked up when she entered, smiled that warm smile that she'd once loved so completely. "You look nice," he said. "Have fun with Vivian." "Thanks. Don't wait up for me. We might be out late." She walked to the door, put her hand on the handle. This was the moment. Once she walked out, there would be no going back. Riley would arrive, knock on the door, and Ramon would have to answer, would have to face his mistress showing up at his home, summoned by what she thought was his invitation. And Monique, instead of actually leaving, would be waiting. She'd thought about this part carefully. The apartment building had a stairwell at the end of their hallway, with a small alcove where the recycling bins were kept. If she went down just one floor and waited on the stairs, she'd be able to hear when someone approached their apartment door, would be able to time her return perfectly. "See you later," Monique said, and opened the door. "Love you," Ramon called from the couch, and she wondered if he'd even noticed that she didn't say it back. Monique stepped into the hallway and let the door close behind her. The click of the lock engaging sounded final, definitive. She stood there for a moment, her hand still on the doorknob, and took a deep breath. This was insane. She was actually doing this, inviting her husband's mistress to their home, setting up an ambush that would destroy whatever remained of her marriage in the most dramatic way possible. She could still stop this. Could actually go to Vivian's, spend the evening drinking wine and crying on her friend's shoulder like a normal person going through a normal marital crisis. Could confront Ramon tomorrow with the evidence she'd collected. Sit down like adults and discuss divorce terms. Handle this whole thing with dignity and maturity. But she didn't want dignity. She wanted justice. She wanted Ramon and his mistress to feel even a fraction of the humiliation and betrayal that she'd been living with for months. Wanted them to understand that actions had consequences, that you couldn't just treat people like they were disposable and expect no repercussions. Monique walked down the hallway to the stairwell door, opened it, and descended one flight. The stairs were concrete and industrial, echoing with her footsteps. She found the small alcove where the recycling bins were kept and positioned herself there, just out of sight, but close enough to hear anyone approaching the fourth floor where her apartment was located. And then she waited. The minutes crawled by. 8:02. 8:05. Monique leaned against the wall, her purse clutched in her hands, her ears straining for any sound from above. The stairwell was quiet, except for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and occasional sounds from other apartments' pipes running. A television playing, someone's muffled laughter. At 8:09, she heard it. The ding of the elevator arriving on the fourth floor, followed by footsteps in the hallway. High heels on hardwood. Click, click, click. Getting closer to apartment 412. Monique's apartment. Her and Ramon's apartment. The footsteps stopped. There was a pause, probably Riley checking her appearance or taking a breath before knocking. Then the sound Monique had been waiting for. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on the door. Confident, eager, completely unsuspecting. Monique climbed the stairs quickly but quietly, reaching the 4th-floor landing just as she heard Ramon's voice through the door, muffled but audible. "Who is it?" He sounded confused. Of course he did. He wasn't expecting anyone. Thought his wife had left for the evening, thought he had the apartment to himself. The last person he'd expect to find on the other side of that door was Riley. "It's me," came Riley's voice, also muffled but recognizable as young and feminine. "You said to come over?" Silence. Heavy, weighted silence. Monique could picture Ramon's face, the color draining from it, his mind racing to understand how this was possible. He hadn't invited Riley over, hadn't texted her. Had he? Was he losing his mind? Had he somehow invited her and forgotten? The door opened. Monique moved closer, pressing herself against the wall near the stairwell door, still out of sight, but able to hear clearly now. "Riley?" Ramon's voice was strangled, panicked. "What are you doing here? You texted me." Riley sounded confused now too, uncertain. "You said your wife wasn't home and to come over at 8. I brought dessert." There was a rustling sound, probably Riley holding up whatever she'd brought. Monique pictured her standing there in the hallway, all dressed up for what she thought was a romantic evening with her married lover, starting to realize that something was very wrong. I never... Ramon was stumbling over his words. "My wife is here. I mean, she just left, but she could come back any minute. You need to go. Now." "But the text..." Riley's voice was rising, confusion turning to distress. "You sent me the address and everything. I don't understand." "I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't send any text. You need to leave before she comes back." This was it. This was the moment. Monique stepped out from her hiding spot near the stairwell and walked calmly down the hallway toward her apartment. She could see them now, framed in her doorway. Ramon in his casual home clothes, his face pale and sweating, and Riley, exactly as she'd imagined. Young, probably mid-20s, blonde hair styled in loose waves, wearing a dress that was nice but trying too hard. She held a white bakery box in her hands, probably containing some expensive pastry from that trendy shop downtown. The girl looked up and saw Monique approaching. Her eyes went wide, her whole body going rigid with terror. She took a step backward, nearly dropping the bakery box. Ramon hadn't noticed yet. He was too focused on trying to get Riley to leave, his back partially to the hallway. "Please," he was saying, his voice desperate. "You have to go right now. I'll explain later. I'll call you. But you cannot be here." "I don't think she's going anywhere," Monique said, her voice cutting through Ramon's panic like a knife. Ramon spun around, and the look on his face would have been comical if the situation weren't so devastating. His mouth fell open, his eyes darting between Monique and Riley like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. All the color that had drained from his face earlier was completely gone now, leaving him gray and sick-looking. "Monique," he gasped. "I thought you... What are you?" "I can explain." "Can you?" Monique walked closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood with the same confident rhythm that Riley's had just minutes before. "I'd love to hear this explanation. I really would." She reached the doorway and looked directly at Riley for the first time. Up close, the girl was prettier than Monique had expected, which somehow made it worse. She had clear skin, bright blue eyes currently filled with tears, and that kind of effortless youth that no amount of expensive skincare could replicate. This was who Ramon had chosen, this girl who could have been anyone, who had nothing special about her except that she wasn't his wife. "Hi there," Monique said, and her voice was so calm it surprised even her. "You must be Riley, the intern. I've heard so much about you." Riley's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The bakery box trembled in her hands. "Actually," Monique continued, I think we should all go inside and have a chat. Don't you agree? Monique, please. Ramon tried to step between them, his hands raised placatingly. This isn't, we don't need to. Oh, but we do. Monique's eyes were steel. See? Riley came all this way because she received a text invitation from you, from your phone, telling her to come to our home because I wouldn't be here. She probably got all dressed up, bought something special from that bakery, maybe spent an hour doing her hair and makeup. It would be rude to send her away now without at least offering her something to drink. I should go, Riley whispered, her voice shaking. She tried to turn away, to flee down the hallway toward the elevator. If you take one single step toward that elevator, Monique said, and her voice dropped to something cold and sharp. Tomorrow morning, every single person at your office will receive an email containing screenshots of every text message you've sent to my husband over the past 3 months. Your supervisor, human resources, the CEO, everyone. And I'll make sure to include the ones where you talk about what you did together during work hours. In his office. On the clock. Riley froze, her back still to them. Additionally, Monique continued, I have your parents' address from the emergency contact information in the company directory. I wonder what they would think about their daughter sleeping with her married supervisor. Do you think they'd be proud? Do you think your mother would understand? Riley turned back around slowly, and now the tears were actually falling, black mascara starting to run down her cheeks. Please, she whispered. Please don't. Then come inside, Monique said, stepping back into the apartment. We're going to have a civilized conversation, the 3 of us. And maybe, if you're very cooperative and very honest, you'll walk out of here tonight with at least some shred of dignity intact. She looked at Ramon, who was standing in the doorway looking like he might vomit. Stop standing there like an idiot and let her in. Unless you'd prefer I have this conversation in the hallway, where all the neighbors can hear. Ramon moved aside mechanically, and Riley, with nowhere else to go and no other options, stepped through the doorway into the apartment, into the home that Monique and Ramon had built together. Her heels clicked on the same hardwood floors that Monique walked on every day. She looked around with wide, frightened eyes, taking in the furniture they'd picked out together, the artwork on the walls, the photographs of Monique and Ramon on various vacations, smiling and happy and oblivious to the future that was waiting for them. Monique closed the door behind all 3 of them with a soft, final click. The sound of it seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the apartment. 3 people, 3 different levels of understanding about what was happening, all trapped together in this space that had been, until a few hours ago, a home. Living room, Monique directed, pointing. Riley, you take the armchair. Ramon, couch. Sit. They obeyed like children being directed by a teacher, both too shocked and frightened to do anything else. Riley perched on the edge of the cream-colored armchair that Monique had bought from that expensive furniture store last year, still clutching her bakery box like a shield. Ramon sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. Monique walked to the kitchen, her movements deliberate and calm. She could feel both of them watching her, could feel the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. She opened the cabinet where they kept their glasses, pulled out 3. For herself and Ramon. She selected 2 of the fine crystal wine glasses they'd received as a wedding gift from Ramon's parents. Beautiful pieces, hand-blown, probably worth $200 each. For Riley, she walked to the cabinet under the sink, where they kept their recycling. She pulled out a red plastic cup, the kind you'd find at a college party or a cheap barbecue. The contrast was deliberate, brutal. She poured water from the filtered pitcher in the refrigerator. For Riley, she filled the plastic cup and set it on the coffee table in front of the armchair without ceremony. For herself and Ramon, she poured water into the crystal glasses, the action slow and purposeful. Riley stared at the plastic cup like it was a snake that might bite her. Her cheeks flushed red as she understood the message. You are not worth the good glasses. You are disposable. You are trash. Monique sat down next to Ramon on the couch, close enough that their legs almost touched. She took a sip from her crystal glass and set it down on the coffee table. Ramon hadn't touched his. He was still sitting with his head in his hands, breathing hard, probably trying to figure out how to talk his way out of this situation. There was no talking his way out. Not this time. "So," Monique said, her voice conversational as if they were discussing the weather. "Riley, tell me, how long have you been sleeping with my husband?" Riley's face went from red to white in an instant. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, no words coming out. The bakery box in her lap trembled, and for a moment Monique thought the girl might actually faint. "I asked you a question," Monique said, still in that same calm, almost pleasant tone. "It's a simple one. How long?" "We—" Riley's voice was barely a whisper. "Speak up, please. I can't hear you when you mumble." "3 months," Riley finally managed, the words coming out in a rush. "About 3 months. 3 months. 90 days, give or take. 90 days of lies, of Ramon coming home and kissing Monique hello while carrying the taste of another woman on his lips. 90 days of him sliding into bed beside her at night, his body still warm from someone else's touch. 90 days of casual betrayal, served up alongside morning coffee and evening dinners and conversations about their future together. 3 months, Monique repeated, nodding as if Riley had just given her a weather forecast. "That's quite a while. I imagine you two must have gotten to know each other pretty well in that time." Riley said nothing, just stared at the plastic cup on the table in front of her like it held all the answers to the universe. "Let me tell you what I know about those 3 months, Monique continued, settling back into the couch cushions. She crossed her legs, the picture of relaxation, while beside her, Ramon remained frozen in his private hell. In those 3 months, Ramon and I celebrated our 6th wedding anniversary. We went to that nice restaurant downtown, the one with the tasting menu. He gave me a card that said he was the luckiest man alive to have me as his wife. Do you remember that night, honey?" She turned to look at Ramon, who still hadn't lifted his head from his hands. "Answer me when I'm talking to you," Monique said, and now there was an edge to her voice, sharp as a blade. "Yes," Ramon croaked. "I remember. That was a Tuesday. Our actual anniversary was on Saturday, but we celebrated on Tuesday because you said you had to work that weekend. A big project deadline, you told me. You were so apologetic about it. Said you felt terrible, missing our anniversary weekend. I told you it was fine, that we could celebrate another time. I was understanding, supportive, because that's what wives do, right? We understand." Monique picked up her crystal glass and took another sip of water. "Did you work that weekend, Ramon? Or were you with Riley?" Silence. "I'm going to need you to answer these questions out loud, for Riley's benefit, since she should probably know what kind of man she's been wasting her time with." "I was with Riley," Ramon whispered. "Sorry, what was that? I don't think she heard you." "I was with Riley." His voice broke on the words, raw and desperate. Riley flinched like she'd been slapped. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, and Monique realized with cold satisfaction that the girl was starting to understand something important. She wasn't special. She wasn't the love of Ramon's life, who he'd been pining for while trapped in a loveless marriage. She was just convenient, just available, just there. "Where did you go that weekend?" Monique asked, genuinely curious now. "Since you weren't working like you told me." "A hotel," Ramon said, his voice muffled. "In the city." "Which hotel?" "The Riverside, the one on 8th Avenue. Monique knew that hotel. They'd stayed there once, years ago, when their apartment was being renovated, and they needed somewhere to stay for a few days. It had been a happy memory, or at least she'd thought it was. Now it was poisoned, like everything else. "That's a nice hotel," Monique said. "Expensive. I'm curious how you paid for it." "We share credit cards, and I never saw a charge from the Riverside." Ramon finally lifted his head. and the look on his face was so wretched that Monique almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I used the corporate card," he admitted. The corporate card. Monique let that sink in. The card that's supposed to be used for business expenses only. "You committed expense fraud to spend our anniversary weekend with a woman who isn't your wife. That's bold." She turned back to Riley. "Did you know that? Did you know he was stealing from his company to pay for your romantic getaways?" Riley shook her head mutely, looking more horrified by the second. "Of course you didn't. I bet there's a lot you don't know." Monique stood up and walked to the kitchen. She opened the refrigerator and pulled out a pitcher of iced tea she'd made that morning. She poured herself a glass, then paused. "Would either of you like some tea?" she asked pleasantly. "It's peach, homemade." Neither of them answered. Monique shrugged and returned to the living room with her glass. Instead of sitting back down on the couch, she walked over to the bookshelf where she and Ramon kept various framed photographs. She picked up one from their wedding day, the two of them standing under an arch of flowers, smiling like they just won the lottery. "This was 6 years ago," Monique said, showing the photo to Riley. "We got married at a vineyard upstate. It was a perfect day. Sunny, 72 degrees, light breeze. I wore my grandmother's veil. Ramon cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. Did you know he was a crier? He cries at movies, too. And sometimes when he's really happy. It's actually kind of sweet." She set that photo down and picked up another. "This is from our honeymoon in Greece. We spent 2 weeks island hopping. Santorini, Mykonos, Crete. Ramon got terrible sunburn the first day because he refused to wear sunscreen. I had to cover him in aloe every night. He complained the whole time, but he kept forgetting to reapply during the day." Another photo. "This is from last Christmas. We went to visit his parents in Pennsylvania. His mother made her famous pot roast. We stayed in his old bedroom and looked at his high school yearbooks. He was so embarrassed by his hair in those photos. He had this terrible attempt at growing it long. Said he was going through a phase where he wanted to be in a rock band." They drew in. Monique set the photos down and turned to face Riley directly. "Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm showing you our life, our real life, the one that exists outside of whatever fantasy you two have been playing at for 3 months. Because here's what I think happened. I think Ramon told you that his marriage was dead, that we were basically roommates who stayed together out of convenience, that he hadn't loved me in years. Am I close?" Riley's silence was answer enough. "Of course that's what he said. That's what they always say. The marriage is over. We're just going through the motions. We sleep in separate beds. All lies designed to make the other woman feel better about what she's doing. To make her feel like she's not really breaking up a marriage because the marriage was already broken." Monique walked back to the couch and sat down, this time deliberately close to Ramon. She put her hand on his knee, and he jumped at the touch, like it burned him. "But here's the truth, Riley. 2 weeks ago, Ramon and I went furniture shopping. We're planning to buy a house next year. A real house, with a yard and a garage. We looked at neighborhoods, talked about school districts, even though we don't have kids yet. We discussed having children, probably 2, maybe 3. We talked about names we liked." She felt Ramon tense beside her, heard his sharp intake of breath. "Oh, did you not tell her about that conversation?" Monique asked him. "About how you wanted to name our first son after your grandfather? About how we'd been trying to save up for a bigger place so we could start a family?" "Please," Ramon whispered. "Monique, please stop." "Stop? Why should I stop? We're just having a conversation. 3 adults, talking honestly about the situation we find ourselves in. Isn't that what you wanted, Riley? Honesty? Transparency?" Riley had both hands over her mouth now, tears streaming down her face, mascara creating dark rivers on her cheeks. She looked young suddenly, not like a seductress or a homewrecker, but like a kid who'd gotten in way over her head and was just starting to realize how deep the water was. "Let me tell you some more truth," Monique continued, her voice still calm, but with an undercurrent of something dangerous now. My parents gave us $35,000 last month. It's sitting in our savings account right now. They sold some property they'd been holding on to for years, and they wanted to help us with the down payment on a house. Do you know what my father said when he handed me the check? He said, "I'm so proud of the life you and Ramon have built together. You picked a good man." She laughed, a sound without humor. A good man. My father, who's never wrong about anything, who can spot a liar from a mile away, thinks Ramon is a good man. And I believed it too. I believed it right up until I saw that text message on your phone tonight. Ramon made a sound somewhere between a sob and a moan. "I'm sorry. God, Monique, I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "You never meant for it to happen?" Monique's composure cracked slightly, her voice rising. "What does that even mean? You accidentally fell into a 3-month affair? You accidentally stole from your company to pay for hotel rooms? You accidentally told this girl you loved her?" "I never said I loved her," Ramon protested weakly. Monique pulled out her phone, opened her screenshots, and started reading. March 15th. "I love being with you. You make me feel things I haven't felt in years." April 2nd. "Last night was incredible. I think I'm falling for you." April 23rd. "You're all I think about. I've never felt this way about anyone." She looked up from her phone. "Want me to keep going? I have pages of this stuff." Ramon's face had gone gray again. Riley looked like she might throw up. "Here's my favorite, though," Monique continued, scrolling through her phone. May 7th. "Being with you makes me feel alive again. Like I'm finally the person I was meant to be." That one really stung, I have to admit. Because what does that make me? The person who made you feel dead? The wife who killed your spirit with her terrible crimes of loving you and trusting you and building a life with you? "I didn't mean it like that," Ramon said desperately. "You're twisting everything." "Am I? Then please, explain what you did mean. I'm all ears." But Ramon had no explanation. He just sat there, caught between his wife and his mistress, probably wishing the couch would swallow him whole. Monique stood up and walked to the kitchen again. This time she pulled out a bowl of fruit they kept on the counter, selected an apple and grabbed a knife from the block. She walked back to the living room and sat down, then held out the knife and apple to Ramon. "Peel this for me," she said. Ramon stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "What? The apple? Peel it. You always peel my apples for me, because I don't like the skin. You've been doing it for 6 years, so do it now." "Monique, I don't think—" "I didn't ask you to think. I asked you to peel the apple." With shaking hands, Ramon took the knife and the apple. He started to peel it, but his hands were trembling so badly he could barely hold the knife steady. The peel came off in jagged, uneven strips instead of the smooth spiral he usually managed. Monique watched him struggle, then reached out and guided his hand, helping him steady the knife. It was an intimate gesture, the kind of casual touch that married couples share without thinking. Her hand over his, working together on this simple task. She glanced at Riley and saw the look on the girl's face. Horror, devastation. The sudden, crushing realization that she was watching actual intimacy, the kind built over years of shared life, and that she would never have that with Ramon. That whatever they'd had in hotel rooms and stolen moments was cheap and shallow by comparison. When the apple was peeled, Monique took it from Ramon and bit into it. The taste was crisp and sweet. She chewed slowly, deliberately, then held the apple out to Ramon. "Have a bite," she said. "Monique, have a bite." Ramon leaned forward and took a small bite from the same apple, from the same spot where her teeth had just been. Another intimate gesture, sharing food. Monique then pushed the bowl of remaining apple slices toward Riley. "You should eat too," she said to the girl. "You look pale." Riley shook her head violently, pushing back against the armchair like she was trying to disappear into it. "No? Not hungry? That's a shame. The apples are really good. Organic. From that farmer's market we go to every Saturday morning." She looked at Ramon. "We should go this weekend, too." They're supposed to have those heirloom tomatoes you like. Stop, Riley suddenly said, her voice cracking. Please stop. I understand. I get it. You win, okay? You win. Just let me go. Win? Monique set down the apple and leaned forward. You think this is about winning? This isn't a game, Riley. This is my life, my marriage, my future that your selfish decisions have destroyed. I didn't know, Riley tried. You didn't know he was married? Really? Did you not notice the ring on his finger? Did you not wonder why he could only see you at certain times? Why he always had to leave by a certain hour? Why he never invited you to his home until tonight, when you thought I wouldn't be here? I knew he was married, Riley admitted, her voice small, but he said you didn't love each other anymore. He said you were getting divorced anyway. And you believed him. Monique's voice was sharp now, cutting. You believed what you wanted to believe because it made it easier. Because if his marriage was already over, then you weren't doing anything wrong. You were just helping a lonely man feel appreciated again. Seetons, she stood up and walked over to Riley's chair, looking down at the crying girl. Let me tell you something about men like Ramon. They don't leave their wives. They want to have both. They want the stability and respectability of a marriage, and they want the excitement of something new on the side. They want a wife at home who'll manage the household and host dinner parties and look good in family photos. And they want a girlfriend who'll make them feel young and desirable and important. Monique crouched down so she was eye level with Riley. You were never going to get a real relationship out of this. You were never going to be the wife. You were just going to be the secret, the thing he did on the side when he was bored or stressed or feeling old. And eventually, he would have gotten tired of you too, and there would have been someone else. Because the problem isn't with me, and it isn't with you. The problem is with him. She stood back up and returned to the couch. But you're young. You'll recover from this. You'll find someone else. Someone who isn't married. Someone who can actually give you a real relationship. In a year or two, this will just be an embarrassing story you tell your friends when you've had too much wine. Monique sat down next to Ramon again, this time taking his hand in hers. He flinched, but didn't pull away. You want to tell her? Or should I? She asked him. Tell her what? Ramon's voice was hoarse. About how this ends. About what happens next. Ramon said nothing, just stared at their joined hands like he was seeing them for the first time. Fine, I'll tell her. Monique looked at Riley. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave here tonight, and you're going to forget this ever happened. You're going to delete every text message, every photo, every piece of evidence that you and Ramon ever had anything other than a professional relationship. You're going to go to work on Monday and treat him exactly like you would treat any other supervisor. Polite, professional, distant. Monique, what are you? Ramon started, but she squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. I'm not finished, she said. Riley is going to do all of this because if she doesn't, I will make good on my earlier threat. Every person at your company will know exactly what you did. Your parents will receive a detailed account with screenshots. And I'll make sure that every potential employer who runs a background check on you finds out exactly why your internship ended early. But I haven't, Riley started. Yet, Monique interrupted. You haven't ended your internship yet, but you will. You're going to resign on Monday? You're going to write a very professional letter about how you've been offered another opportunity elsewhere, and you're giving your 2 weeks' notice. And then you're going to work those 2 weeks without incident. And then you're going to disappear from Ramon's life completely. Riley was crying harder now, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. That's not fair. I worked hard for that internship. I need it for my resume. You should have thought about that before you started sleeping with your supervisor, Monique said coldly. Actions have consequences. Consider this a lesson learned. She turned back to Ramon. As for you, Ramon finally looked at her, and his eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. Monique, please, I love you. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through it. Please don't throw away 6 years of marriage over one mistake. One mistake? Monique's laugh was bitter. This wasn't a mistake. A mistake is forgetting our anniversary or buying the wrong brand of coffee. This was a choice. Actually, it was hundreds of choices. Every time you texted her, every time you met her, every time you lied to me, those were choices. Don't insult me by calling it a mistake. What do you want me to say? Ramon's voice broke. Tell me what you want me to say, and I'll say it. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. Just don't leave me. Please don't leave me. Monique pulled her hand away from his. I want you to understand something. Right now, in this moment, I hate you more than I've ever hated anyone in my entire life. I hate you for what you did. I hate you for lying to me. I hate you for making me feel crazy when I questioned things that turned out to be true. I hate you for wasting 6 years of my life. And most of all, I hate you for making me sit here and play this role, making me be the angry wife confronting the other woman, making me into some cliché from a bad TV drama. She stood up and walked to the door, picked up her purse from where she'd set it when she came back inside. Riley, you can go now. Don't forget what I told you. Resignation letter on Monday. 2 weeks' notice. And if I ever see or hear about you contacting my husband again, the deal is off. Riley scrambled to her feet, still clutching the bakery box she'd brought. She looked at Ramon like she was waiting for him to say something, to defend her or protect her, or at least acknowledge what they'd shared. But Ramon just sat on the couch, his head in his hands again, silent. The girl's face crumpled as she realized he wasn't going to fight for her, wasn't going to object to Monique's demands or try to make some dramatic declaration of love. He was just going to let her go without a word, proving everything Monique had said about being disposable. Riley walked to the door, her heels clicking on the hardwood one last time. She paused at the threshold, looked back once more at Ramon, and then she was gone. The door closed behind her with a soft click, and then it was just Monique and Ramon, alone in the apartment that had been their home, surrounded by 6 years of shared memories that now felt tainted and false. Monique walked back to the couch, but didn't sit down. She looked down at her husband, this man she'd promised to love forever, and felt nothing but cold emptiness. "Stand up," she said. Ramon stood, unsteady on his feet. "Go to the bedroom. Pack a bag. Enough for a few days." "What?" "Monique, no. Please. We need to talk about this." "We just talked about it. For the past hour, we talked. Now, I want you to pack a bag and leave." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care. Stay with a friend. Get a hotel. Sleep in your car. But you're not staying here tonight." "This is my home too," Ramon said, and there was a flash of something defensive in his voice. "Is it? Because it seems to me that you already have another home. The one you've been building with Riley for the past 3 months. Those hotel rooms, those secret meetups, that whole other life you've been living. So go live in that. Get out of mine." Ramon opened his mouth to argue, but something in Monique's face must have told him it was pointless. He walked to the bedroom like a man heading to his own execution. Monique followed, standing in the doorway while he pulled a duffel bag from the closet and started throwing clothes into it. Jeans, shirts, underwear, socks. The mundane details of leaving. He paused at his nightstand, looked at the photo of them that sat there in a silver frame. Taken on vacation in California, both of them wind-blown and laughing on some beach. He reached for it. "Leave it," Monique said. "It's just a photo." I said leave it. Take what you need, nothing else. Ramon dropped his hand and zipped up the duffel bag. He walked past her without looking at her face, grabbed his keys from the bowl by the door where they always kept them. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "I really am sorry," he said quietly. "For what it's worth, I really am sorry." "It's not worth anything," Monique replied. "Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back the time I wasted. Sorry doesn't erase what you did. So keep your sorry. I don't want it." Ramon left. The door closed behind him. and Monique stood alone in the apartment, in the sudden silence that felt like it might suffocate her. She waited until she heard the elevator ding, heard it descend with her husband inside, carrying him away. Then, and only then, did she allow herself to break. She sank down onto the floor right there in the entryway, her back against the wall, and let the tears come. They'd been building for hours, days, months maybe. All the times she'd swallowed her suspicions, all the times she'd told herself she was imagining things, all the times she'd chosen to trust when she should have been questioning. It all came pouring out now in racking sobs that left her gasping for air. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of her crying. The dinner dishes were still in the sink. The apple she'd made Ramon peel was still sitting on the coffee table, browning slightly from exposure to air. The plastic cup she'd given Riley was still there too, full of water that the girl had never drunk. Evidence of the strangest, most painful evening of Monique's life, scattered around her home like debris from an explosion. She cried until she had nothing left, until her eyes were swollen, and her throat was raw, and her chest ached from the force of it. Then she pulled out her phone and called the only person who would understand. Vivian answered on the first ring. "Monique, are you okay? What happened? Can you come over?" Monique asked, her voice wrecked. I just need you to come over." "I'm already in my car," Vivian said. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Thank you," Monique whispered. "Whatever happened, we'll get through it. I promise. Just hang on." Monique hung up and let her head fall back against the wall. Through the window, she could see the city lights twinkling, the world going on like normal, while hers was falling apart. People in other apartments having normal evenings, normal conversations, normal lives. She'd thought she had that once. A normal life, a good marriage, a future to look forward to. But it had all been an illusion, as insubstantial as smoke. Still, sitting there on the floor of her apartment, Monique felt something underneath the grief, something hard and bright and unbreakable. She'd done what she set out to do tonight. She'd confronted the truth instead of running from it. She'd taken control of a situation that could have destroyed her and turned it into something else. A statement, a declaration that she wouldn't be made a fool of, that she wouldn't sit quietly while her life was torn apart. It wasn't over yet. There would be lawyers and division of assets and all the ugly practicalities of divorce. There would be hard conversations and harder decisions. But she'd already taken the first step, the hardest one. She'd looked at the truth and hadn't flinched. Outside, a car door slammed. Footsteps in the hallway, quick and purposeful. A knock on the door. "Monique, it's me. Let me in." Monique stood up on shaking legs and opened the door. Vivian took one look at her friend's tear-stained face and pulled her into a fierce hug. "Okay," Vivian said softly. "Okay, I'm here. Tell me everything." And Monique did. They sat on the couch together, the same couch where Ramon had been sitting just an hour before, and Monique told Vivian everything. Every detail, from the moment she'd seen that text message on Ramon's phone to the look on Riley's face when she'd realized she was disposable. Vivian listened without interrupting, her hand holding Monique's, occasionally squeezing when the story got particularly painful. When Monique finished, Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That was either the most brilliant or the most insane thing you've ever done. I'm still deciding which." "Maybe both," Monique said, and was surprised to find herself almost smiling. The tears had stopped, leaving behind a strange emptiness, like she'd cried out everything inside her and was now just a hollow shell. "What you did to that girl," Vivian shook her head. "The plastic cup, making Ramon peel the apple? That was brutal, Monique. Effective, but brutal. She deserved it. Maybe. Or maybe she was just a stupid kid who believed a married man's lies. Either way, she won't forget tonight anytime soon." Vivian stood up and walked to the kitchen, started opening cabinets. "Where do you keep the real alcohol? Because water isn't going to cut it right now." "Top shelf, left of the stove." Vivian pulled down a bottle of whiskey, the expensive kind that Ramon saved for special occasions. She poured 2 generous glasses and brought them back to the couch. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. Monique clinked her glass against Vivian's and took a drink. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a good burn, a cleansing burn. "What do I do now?" she asked. "I made him leave, but that doesn't solve anything. We're still married. We still own this apartment together. Our lives are still completely intertwined." "Now," Vivian said, and her voice shifted into the professional tone she used with clients, "now you let me do what I do best. We're going to build a case so airtight that Ramon won't have a choice but to give you everything you want in the divorce. I have screenshots of their messages. Is that enough? It's a start, but we need more. We need to document everything. The expense fraud with the corporate card, that's big. That's not just infidelity. That's actual theft from his employer. We can use that." Monique took another drink. "I told Riley to resign. Was that stupid? Should I have kept her around as a witness or something? No, you did the right thing. The last thing you need is her making this messy. Better to have her disappear quietly." Vivian pulled out her phone and started typing notes. "Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, you're going to gather every piece of evidence you have. Bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots, everything. We're going to document every lie, every unexplained expense, every time he used joint funds to finance his affair. He used the corporate card for the hotel. Even better. That means we can threaten to report him to his employer. He won't want that scandal. Trust me. He'll be much more cooperative in the divorce if his job is on the line." Monique felt something shift in her chest. Not quite hope, but something close to it. The feeling of having a plan, of moving forward instead of just drowning in the wreckage. What about the apartment? Community property. You're entitled to half of everything. But given his infidelity and the financial misconduct, we can push for more. We can push for him to buy you out of your share at current market value, or force a sale and split the proceeds. Either way, you're not walking away from this with nothing. "My parents gave us $35,000 for a house down payment?" Vivian's eyes sharpened. "When?" "Last month. It's in our joint savings account. That's a gift to both of you, which makes it marital property. But we can argue it was a gift specifically to you, intended for your benefit. Your parents would be willing to testify to that? They'd testify to anything if it means protecting me from him." "Good. Then that money is yours. We'll make sure of it." Vivian kept typing on her phone. "What about his retirement account? Any investments? He has a 401k through work, and we have some stocks. Maybe $20,000 worth. Half of that is yours. Half of his retirement is yours. Half of everything is yours. And depending on how aggressive we want to be, we might be able to get more than half." Vivian looked up from her phone. "The question is, how nasty do you want this to get?" Monique thought about that. About Ramon's face tonight. The way he'd begged her not to leave him. About Riley crying in the armchair, mascara running down her face, about all the lies and all the months of suspicion, and all the times she'd felt crazy for questioning what her gut was telling her. "I want him to understand that there are consequences," she said slowly. "I want him to lose something that matters. Not just me, because apparently I didn't matter enough, but something real, something that hurts." Vivian smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice smile. "Then, we're going to make sure Monday morning is very, very unpleasant for him." "What do you mean?" "You said he used the corporate card for personal expenses, that he took Riley to a hotel on the company's dime. Do you have proof of that?" "He admitted it tonight. Riley was there. She heard him. Riley won't testify against him. She's got her own mess to deal with. But if you have the credit card statements, if you can show a pattern of misuse, that's something else entirely." Monique stood up and walked to the small desk in the corner, where they kept important documents. She pulled out the file folder labeled Credit Cards and started flipping through statements. There, highlighted in yellow from when she'd first noticed them months ago, were the charges she'd questioned. Restaurants Ramon had never mentioned, the hotel, a jewelry purchase, flowers from an expensive florist, sent to an address she didn't recognize. She brought the statements to Vivian, who examined them with the focused intensity of a surgeon studying X-rays. "This is good," Vivian said. "This is really good. These are clear violations of corporate policy. Most companies have zero tolerance for this kind of thing. So what do? We write a very detailed, very professional email to Ramon's Human Resources Department. We don't make it personal. We don't mention the affair specifically. We simply provide documentation showing that an employee has been misusing corporate funds, and we suggest that they investigate the matter thoroughly. Won't they know it came from me? We'll send it from a generic email account. Make it look like it came from someone inside the company who noticed irregularities. By the time they trace it back, if they even bother, the damage will already be done." Monique sat back down, her mind racing. What will happen to him? At minimum, suspension while they investigate. More likely, termination. Corporate theft is serious, Monique. Companies don't mess around with that. And if they fire him for cause, he won't get severance, won't be able to collect unemployment. He'll be blacklisted in his industry. The thought should have made her feel guilty. Ramon was her husband, had been her husband for 6 years. She'd loved him once. Maybe still loved some version of him that had existed before all of this. Destroying his career seemed cruel, excessive even. But then she remembered the look on his face when he'd admitted to spending their anniversary weekend with Riley. Remembered him standing in their kitchen cooking dinner while messages from his mistress lit up his phone. Remembered 6 years of what she'd thought was a good marriage, revealed to be a carefully constructed lie. "Do it," she said. "Send the email." Vivian looked at her carefully. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no taking it back. This will destroy him professionally. He destroyed our marriage. He destroyed my ability to trust. He destroyed 6 years of my life. Why should his career be protected when nothing else is?" "Okay." Vivian pulled out her laptop. "Then, let's do this right. We need to make it look professional, like it's coming from someone who's genuinely concerned about company resources being misused, not from a vengeful spouse." They spent the next hour crafting the email. Vivian wrote it in her professional attorney voice, clinical and detached. She attached scans of the credit card statements with the relevant charges highlighted. She included dates, amounts, and locations. She noted that the charges appeared to be personal in nature, including romantic dinners and hotel stays, and suggested that the company might want to investigate whether other expenses had been similarly misused. It was damning. Objective and professional, but absolutely damning. "We should include something about the relationship with the intern," Vivian said. "That's another violation. Supervisors aren't supposed to have relationships with people they oversee. It's in every corporate handbook. But I told Riley to resign. Won't that look suspicious if we report it right after she quits? She hasn't resigned yet. She won't even write the letter until Monday. We send this email Sunday night, late. It'll be waiting in the HR inbox first thing Monday morning. They'll start investigating before Riley even has a chance to submit her resignation." Monique thought about Riley, about the girl's tear-stained face, and the bakery box she'd brought for a romantic evening that had turned into a nightmare. Part of her felt sorry for what was about to happen to her, but only a small part. "Send it," she said again. "Not yet. We need to be strategic about timing, but we'll get it ready to go." Vivian saved the draft email and closed her laptop. "Now, let's talk about what happens next for you. Where do you want to be a year from now?" The question caught Monique off guard. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis, on the anger and betrayal and the need to make Ramon pay, that she hadn't thought about the future, about what came after all of this. "I don't know," she admitted. "I haven't thought that far ahead." Start thinking, because divorce isn't just about ending something, it's about beginning something else. You're 39 years old. You have a good career. You're smart. You're beautiful. This isn't the end of your life, Monique. It's just the end of this chapter. It doesn't feel that way right now. I know. Right now it feels like everything is falling apart. But I promise you, a year from now, you're going to look back on this and be grateful. Grateful that you found out when you did. Grateful that you didn't waste another 6 years, another 10 years, on someone who didn't deserve you. Monique wanted to believe that. Wanted to imagine a future where this pain was just a memory, where she'd moved on and built a new life and found happiness again. But it seemed impossible from where she was sitting. "What if I can't do this?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm not strong enough?" You invited your husband's mistress to your home, made her sit in a plastic cup like a child, and systematically destroyed any illusions she had about their relationship. Then you kicked your husband out of his own apartment. Trust me, you're strong enough. They talked for another hour, planning and strategizing. Vivian walked her through what the divorce process would look like. The timeline, the paperwork, the court appearances. It was overwhelming and exhausting, but also strangely comforting to have a plan, to know what the next steps were instead of just drowning in emotion. Around midnight, Vivian finally stood up to leave. "Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow we start documenting everything. Every text, every email, every receipt. We build a case so strong that Ramon has no choice but to give you everything you deserve." After Vivian left, Monique walked through the apartment, seeing it with new eyes. This place that had been her home for 4 years suddenly felt foreign. The couch where she'd confronted Ramon, the kitchen where he'd cooked dinner while his mistress texted him, the bedroom where they'd shared a bed, where she'd fallen asleep next to him night after night, completely unaware that he was living a double life. She couldn't stay here. Not long term. Too many memories, too much pain soaked into the walls. But for tonight, she was too exhausted to go anywhere else. She went to the bedroom, looked at the bed they'd shared, and made a decision. She grabbed a pillow and a blanket and went back to the living room. She'd sleep on the couch tonight. The bed felt too intimate. Too much like accepting something she wasn't ready to accept. She lay down on the couch, pulled the blanket over herself, and stared at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ramon. "I'm at a hotel, the Marriott downtown. Room 317. Please call me. We need to talk. I love you." Monique stared at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to respond, wanted to call him and scream or cry, or demand answers to questions that probably didn't have satisfying answers anyway. But what would be the point? What was there left to say? She deleted the message without responding and set her phone face down on the coffee table. Sleep came eventually, fitful and filled with dreams she wouldn't remember in the morning. When she woke up, sunlight was streaming through the windows, and for one blissful moment, she forgot everything that had happened. Then it all came rushing back, and the weight of it settled on her chest like a physical thing. Saturday. She had the whole weekend before Monday, when everything would explode. 2 days to prepare, to gather evidence, to shore up her defenses for what was coming. She got up, made coffee, and got to work. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of activity. She went through every credit card statement from the past year, highlighting suspicious charges. She printed out screenshots of Ramon's messages with Riley, organized them chronologically. She made a list of every lie she could remember. Every time he'd said he was working late, or had a meeting, or needed to go into the office on a weekend, he called her parents and told them everything. Her father's voice went cold and dangerous in a way she'd never heard before. Her mother cried. They wanted to drive up immediately, but Monique told them to wait. She needed to do this herself, needed to prove that she could handle it. Sunday evening, as the sun was setting, Vivian came over with takeout and her laptop. They sat at the dining table and went over everything one more time. The email to Ramon's HR department was ready to send, timed to arrive in their inbox at 8 Monday morning. "Last chance to back out," Vivian said, her finger hovering over the send button. "Once this goes out, there's no stopping it." Monique thought about Riley's face. about Ramon's pathetic apologies, about 6 years of her life built on lies. "Send it," she said. Vivian clicked send. The email disappeared into the digital void, carrying with it the destruction of Ramon's career. "Done," Vivian said. "By noon tomorrow, his whole world is going to be upside down." They ate their Chinese food in silence, both of them aware that they'd just set something in motion that couldn't be stopped. It felt momentous and terrifying and oddly anticlimactic all at once. After Vivian left, Monique sat alone in the quiet apartment and waited for Monday to come. She didn't have to wait long. At 8:30 Monday morning, her phone rang. Ramon. She didn't answer. He called again at 8:45, again at 9. She ignored all of them. At 9:15, a text. "They suspended me. HR is investigating." "What did you do? What did you do?" Monique read the message and felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a strange emptiness. Another call at 9:30. This time she answered. "How could you?" Ramon's voice was frantic, desperate. "How could you do this to me? They're talking about pressing charges, criminal charges, Monique. I could go to jail." "You stole from your company," Monique said calmly. "You used corporate funds to pay for your affair. What did you think would happen? I'll pay it back. I'll pay back every penny. But you need to tell them it was a misunderstanding. You need to fix this." "No." "No? What do you mean, no?" "Monique, this is my career, my entire future. You're going to destroy me over one mistake? I'm not destroying you, Ramon. You destroyed yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows what you did. Please." His voice broke. "Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Riley. I'll do whatever you want. Just please, call HR and tell them this was a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was theft and infidelity and lies. So many lies. I love you. I know I screwed up, but I love you. Doesn't that count for anything?" Monique looked around the apartment, at all the photographs of them together, at the life they'd built that had turned out to be a facade. "It used to," she said quietly. "It used to count for everything. But you made it count for nothing. You did that, not me." She hung up while he was still talking, still pleading. She blocked his number. An hour later, her phone rang again. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Mrs. Stevenson? This is Patricia Chen from Wilson and Associates HR Department. I'm calling regarding the matter we're currently investigating involving your husband." "I have nothing to say to you," Monique said. "Anything you need to know should be in the evidence that was submitted." "I understand. I just wanted to inform you that we take these allegations very seriously. Mr. Stevenson has been placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of our investigation. I also wanted to ask if you'd be willing to provide any additional information. Everything relevant has already been provided. I have nothing to add." "I see. Well, thank you for your time. If anything changes, please don't hesitate to contact us." Monique hung up and sat down on the couch, her hands shaking slightly. It was done. Really done. Ramon's career was imploding, and she was the one who'd lit the match. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it. "This is Riley. Please call off whatever you're doing. They're asking me questions. They know about us. I'm going to lose everything." Monique stared at the message, then typed back, "You were supposed to resign this morning. Why didn't you?" The response came quickly. "I was going to, but they called me into HR before I could. Now they're investigating. They're going to fire me. Please, you have to help me. I don't have to do anything. You made your choices. Now you live with the consequences." She blocked Riley's number too. The rest of Monday passed in a strange haze. Monique went to work, sat through meetings, responded to emails, all while her phone continued to blow up with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Ramon's friends, probably. His family, maybe. She ignored all of them. At 5, she got a call from Vivian. "Have you heard?" "Heard what?" "Ramon was officially terminated an hour ago. For cause." They're also considering whether to press criminal charges for the expense fraud. Monique sat down at her desk, suddenly lightheaded. That was fast. The evidence was pretty clear. Once HR started digging, they found even more irregularities. Apparently, this wasn't the first time he'd misused company funds, just the most egregious. What about Riley? Her internship was terminated too. Violation of company policy regarding relationships between supervisors and subordinates. She won't be getting a reference from them. Good. How are you holding up? I don't know, Monique admitted. I thought I'd feel something. Victory, maybe, or satisfaction, but I just feel empty. That's normal. You're grieving, not just for your marriage, but for the life you thought you had. It takes time. What happens now? Now we file for divorce. We use all of this as leverage to get you the best possible settlement. Ramon is going to be desperate, unemployed, probably facing criminal charges. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him just to make it go away. And that's exactly what happened. The divorce papers were filed Wednesday. Ramon signed them without contest the following week. He gave Monique everything: the apartment, the savings account with her parents' money, half of his retirement fund, half of their investment portfolio. He agreed to pay all the legal fees. He agreed to everything because he had no choice, no leverage, no way to fight back. The apartment sold 3 weeks later for more than they'd paid for it. After paying off the mortgage and splitting the proceeds, Monique walked away with enough money to put a down payment on a smaller place in a quieter neighborhood. Ramon's company decided not to press criminal charges, probably to avoid the publicity. But they did report him to industry regulators, which meant getting another job in his field was going to be nearly impossible. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Monique stood in the doorway of her new apartment and smiled. It was smaller than the place she'd shared with Ramon, just a 2-bedroom in a quieter part of the city, but it was entirely hers. Every piece of furniture, every decoration, every choice had been made by her alone. No compromises, no considering what someone else might want, just her taste, her style, her life. The walls were painted a soft sage green that she'd always loved, but Ramon had said was too feminine. The couch was cream-colored linen, impractical but beautiful, the kind of thing she never would have bought when she had to worry about someone else spilling things on it. Plants lined the windowsills, thriving in the natural light that poured through the large windows she'd specifically chosen this apartment for. It was the first Saturday of October, and the air coming through the open balcony door carried the crisp promise of autumn. Monique had spent the morning at the farmer's market, the same one she used to go to with Ramon. Except now she went alone, and it felt like freedom instead of loneliness. She'd bought fresh flowers, heirloom tomatoes, a loaf of sourdough bread that was still warm from the oven. Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Vivian. "Lunch today? I have news." Monique typed back, "Come over. I'll make sandwiches." An hour later, Vivian arrived with a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. They sat on Monique's new couch, eating lunch and catching up the way they'd been doing every week since the divorce. These Saturday lunches had become a ritual, a reminder that Monique wasn't alone even when she felt lonely. "So," Vivian said, setting down her wine glass, "I heard something interesting through the legal gossip mill yesterday. About Ramon? About Ramon and Riley, actually." Monique's stomach tightened. She'd worked hard not to think about either of them, had blocked their numbers and avoided any mutual friends who might bring them up. Hearing their names still stung, even now. "I'm not sure I want to know. Trust me. You want to know this." Vivian leaned forward. Apparently Riley tried to sue Ramon, claimed he'd promised her things, led her on, damaged her professional reputation. She wanted compensation for her lost internship and future career prospects. Did she win? The case was dismissed. No lawyer would take it seriously. But here's the interesting part. During the proceedings, it came out that Ramon had been telling Riley he was going to leave you, told her they'd be together officially, that he'd marry her once the divorce was final. promised her all sorts of things. Monique felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. Of course he did. That's what men like him do. They promise everything to everyone and deliver nothing to anyone. Well, Riley apparently believed him. When he lost his job and couldn't follow through on any of those promises, she felt betrayed, hence the lawsuit. Vivian took a sip of wine. From what I heard, Ramon is working at a call center now, making about a third of what he used to make, living in a studio apartment in a pretty rough part of town. Monique tried to feel something about that. Satisfaction, maybe, or vindication. But mostly, she just felt tired. And Riley? Last I heard, she moved back to her hometown, lives with her parents, works at a local retail store. Her dreams of a big career in the city are pretty much dead. They sat in silence for a moment, both contemplating the wreckage of lives that had imploded from poor choices and selfish decisions. "Do you ever feel guilty?" Vivian asked quietly. "About what happened to them?" Monique considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted, "late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about that email we sent, about how it destroyed Ramon's career, about how Riley's life got derailed, and I wonder if I went too far. But then I remember that they made their choices. Ramon chose to cheat, chose to steal from his company, chose to lie to me for months. Riley chose to sleep with a married man, chose to believe his promises even though she knew he was lying to someone else. I didn't make those choices for them. I just made sure they faced consequences." Vivian nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Not the nice thing, maybe. Not the forgiving thing, but the right thing. Sometimes I'm not sure there's a difference anymore." They finished lunch, and Vivian left around 3, leaving Monique alone in her quiet apartment. She cleaned up the dishes, watered her plants, and tried to decide what to do with the rest of her day. The freedom was still strange sometimes. No one to check in with, no one whose schedule she had to consider. Just empty hours stretching ahead, waiting to be filled however she wanted. She decided to go for a walk. The neighborhood was beautiful in autumn. Tree-lined streets with leaves turning gold and red. She'd discovered a small park a few blocks away, with a pond and walking trails and benches where you could sit and watch the ducks. As she walked, her mind drifted back over the past few months. The immediate aftermath of the divorce had been brutal. There had been days when she couldn't get out of bed, when the weight of everything that had happened felt too heavy to carry. Days when she questioned every decision she'd made, wondered if she should have tried harder to save her marriage, been more forgiving, less vindictive. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things had started to shift. The bad days came less frequently. The moments of peace grew longer. She'd thrown herself into her work and gotten that promotion to senior director she'd been hoping for. The raise that came with it had helped her afford this new apartment, had given her a sense of security she hadn't realized she'd lost. She'd also started therapy, something she probably should have done years ago. Dr. Martinez had helped her understand that what she'd experienced wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal on multiple levels. The loss of trust. The gaslighting when Ramon had made her feel crazy for suspecting things that turned out to be true. The erosion of her self-worth as she'd tried to figure out what was wrong with her that had made him look elsewhere. "You didn't make him cheat?" Dr. Martinez had said during one session. "His infidelity had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with his character. Remember that." Monique had written those words down, taped them to her bathroom mirror where she'd see them every morning. Some days, she believed them. Other days, she still struggled. She reached the park and sat on her favorite bench, the one with a view of the pond. A family was feeding the ducks, a mother and father with 2 small children who squealed with delight every time a duck came close. Monique watched them with a complicated mix of emotions. She'd wanted that once. A family, children, the whole picture of domestic happiness. She and Ramon had talked about it, had been planning for it. Now she was 39, divorced, starting over, The future she'd imagined had evaporated, and she was still figuring out what the new future would look like. Her phone buzzed, an email notification. She almost ignored it, then saw the sender's name, and her heart stopped. Ramon. She hadn't heard from him directly in months, not since the divorce was finalized. He'd been blocked on everything, but apparently he'd created a new email address just to contact her. Against her better judgment, she opened it. Monique, I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to contact you after everything I did, but I need you to know something. I need you to understand that I'm sorry. Not the kind of sorry I said that night when you caught me, when I was just trying to save myself, but real sorry. The kind that comes from understanding what I lost and why I lost it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking for anything at all. I just need you to know that you were right about everything. About me being selfish and cowardly. About Riley being disposable. About me not appreciating what I had until it was gone. I lost my job because of my own choices. I lost you because of my own choices. I destroyed my own life, and I can't blame anyone but myself. And the worst part is knowing that I hurt someone who never deserved to be hurt. Someone who loved me and trusted me and built a life with me in good faith. You were an amazing wife. You were loyal and supportive, and you made our house a home. And I threw it all away for something that wasn't even real, for an illusion that felt exciting in the moment, but turned out to be nothing at all. I don't expect you to respond to this. I'm sure you've moved on, and you should. You deserve someone who will appreciate you the way I should have, someone who won't take you for granted, someone who understands what a gift it is to be loved by you. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that you were right to do what you did. I deserved every consequence I got. I hope you're happy, Monique. I really do. Ramon. Monique read the email 3 times, feeling different things with each reading. Anger that he'd contacted her when she'd made it clear she wanted no communication. Sadness for the marriage that had failed, and the man she'd thought she'd known who'd turned out to be someone else entirely. And underneath it all, a strange sense of closure. She thought about responding, thought about telling him that his apology didn't change anything, didn't heal the wounds he'd inflicted, didn't give her back the years she'd wasted. But what would be the point? What was there left to say that hadn't already been said? Instead, she deleted the email and blocked the new address. Whatever Ramon needed from her, whatever absolution he was seeking, wasn't hers to give. He'd have to find peace with his choices on his own. She sat on the bench for a while longer, watching the family with the ducks, and thought about forgiveness. Dr. Martinez had talked about this too, about how forgiveness wasn't something you did for the other person. It was something you did for yourself, to release the anger and resentment that was weighing you down. You don't have to forgive him, Dr. Martinez had said, but you do need to let go of the bitterness. Carrying that around only hurts you, not him. Monique wasn't sure she was ready to forgive Ramon. Maybe she never would be, but she was working on letting go of the anger, on not letting what he'd done define the rest of her life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Monique's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a number she didn't recognize, but the preview made her smile. Hi, Monique. This is Jessica Chen from the Women in Business Leadership Conference. We received your application to be a speaker at our November event, and we'd love to have you present on navigating career transitions and personal reinvention. Would you be available for a call this week to discuss details? Monique had submitted that application on a whim 2 weeks ago, encouraged by her therapist who'd said she should start sharing her story. Not the details of the divorce, but the broader narrative of rebuilding after loss, of finding strength in difficult circumstances, of choosing to move forward even when it felt impossible. She typed back, "Yes, I'd be honored. I'm available Tuesday or Thursday afternoon." The response came quickly. "Perfect. Tuesday at 2 works for me. Looking forward to speaking with you." Monique stood up from the bench and started walking back to her apartment. But this time, her steps felt lighter. She was going to be a speaker at a professional conference. Her expertise and experience were valued. People wanted to hear what she had to say. When had that shift happened? When had she gone from feeling like a victim of circumstance to feeling like someone who had survived something difficult and come out stronger? She couldn't pinpoint an exact moment. It had been gradual, almost imperceptible, like watching a sunrise, where you don't notice the sky getting lighter until suddenly you realize you can see clearly. Back at her apartment, Monique made herself dinner. Just a simple pasta with the tomatoes from the farmer's market, fresh basil, good olive oil. She ate on her balcony, watching the city lights come on as darkness fell. No one to cook for but herself. No one to please but herself. No one to consider but herself. For the first time in a long time, that didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. Her laptop was open on the coffee table inside, and after she finished eating, she sat down and opened a new document. If she was going to speak at this conference, she needed to organize her thoughts, needed to figure out what message she wanted to share with other women who might be going through their own difficult transitions. She started typing. 18 months ago, I discovered my husband was having an affair. That discovery set off a chain of events that would completely dismantle the life I thought I had and force me to rebuild from scratch. Today, I'm going to tell you why that was the best thing that ever happened to me. She paused, reread what she'd written, and smiled. It was true. She wouldn't have believed it 6 months ago, 3 months ago, maybe not even a month ago. But sitting here in her apartment, in her new life, she could honestly say that losing her marriage had led to finding herself. The woman she'd been with Ramon had been smaller somehow, always considering his opinions, his preferences, his needs, always smoothing over conflicts, making excuses, trying to be the perfect wife. She'd lost herself in the process of being what she thought he wanted. Now she was just Monique, not someone's wife, not half of a couple, just herself, figuring out what she wanted and what made her happy without filtering it through someone else's expectations. She wrote for 2 hours, the words flowing easier than she'd expected. She wrote about the shock of betrayal, the anger that had consumed her, the careful planning of her revenge. She wrote about the satisfaction of watching consequences unfold and the emptiness that had followed. She wrote about the slow, painful work of rebuilding, of learning to trust herself again, of discovering who she was without the identity of wife to define her. When she finally stopped, she had 5 pages of raw, honest reflection. It would need editing, shaping, refining before it was ready for public consumption. But the core was there, the truth of her experience. She saved the document and closed her laptop. It was after 11, later than she usually stayed up, but she didn't feel tired. She felt energized, alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. On impulse, she opened her email and scrolled back to find a message she'd received 2 weeks ago, an invitation from a college friend to a reunion dinner next month. She'd initially declined, not ready to face questions about her divorce, not wanting to be the tragic figure who showed up alone while everyone else brought spouses and shared stories of their happy lives. She hit reply and typed, "Actually, I've changed my mind. Count me in. Looking forward to seeing everyone." Because she was done hiding. Done feeling ashamed of something that wasn't her fault. Done letting Ramon's choices dictate how she lived her life. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. The speaking engagement was confirmed, and Monique spent her evenings refining her presentation. She practiced in front of Vivian, who gave honest feedback, and helped her strike the right balance between raw honesty and professional polish. "You need to mention the revenge," Vivian said during one practice session. "That's the part people will connect with. Everyone's fantasized about confronting the other woman or getting back at a cheating spouse. But most people don't actually do it. You did, and you owned it. But I don't want to come across as vindictive. You weren't vindictive. You were strategic. There's a difference. You took control of a situation where you'd been powerless. That's not revenge. That's justice. Monique added a section about the night she'd invited Riley to the apartment, about the plastic cup and the deliberate humiliation, about the email to HR and the calculated destruction of Ramon's career. She framed it not as petty revenge, but as a woman refusing to be made a victim, choosing to fight back in the only way available to her. The conference was on a Friday in mid-November. Monique arrived early, her stomach churning with nerves. She'd given presentations before, countless times at work. But this was different. This was personal. The room filled slowly. Mostly women, ranging from their 20s to their 60s. Some in business suits, others more casual. All of them looking for something, some piece of wisdom, or inspiration, or validation. When it was time to start, Monique took a deep breath and walked to the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces and saw her own past reflected back at her. Women who'd been hurt, who'd been betrayed, who were trying to figure out how to move forward. "My name is Monique Stevenson," she began, "and I want to tell you about the worst and best thing that ever happened to me." She spoke for 45 minutes, telling her story with unflinching honesty. The discovery of the affair, the months of suspicion beforehand, the night of the confrontation, the divorce, the aftermath, the slow rebuilding. She talked about the anger and the grief and the moments when she wasn't sure she'd survive the pain. And then she talked about what came after: the new apartment, the promotion, the therapy, the gradual rediscovery of herself, the realization that she was stronger than she'd known, more resilient than she'd believed, more capable of happiness than she'd dared to hope. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone in the back started clapping, and soon the entire audience was on their feet, applauding. During the Q&A session that followed, a young woman in the front row raised her hand. "Do you regret what you did? Destroying his career, I mean. Do you ever wish you'd just walked away?" Monique considered the question carefully. "I think there's a difference between regret and reflection. Do I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd handled things differently? Sure. But do I regret standing up for myself and refusing to be a silent victim? No. I don't regret that at all." Another woman asked, "Have you dated anyone since the divorce?" Monique smiled. "Not yet. I'm still figuring out who I am as a single person. I spent 6 years being someone's wife, and before that, I was in other relationships. I've never really been alone, and I'm learning that I actually kind of like it. When I'm ready to date again, I'll know, but I'm not in a hurry." After the session ended, several women came up to talk to her privately. One was going through a divorce herself and cried as she thanked Monique for giving her hope. Another said she'd been contemplating leaving her own unfaithful husband, but had been too scared. Monique's story had given her courage. "You showed me that there's life after this," the woman said, gripping Monique's hand, "that it's possible to not just survive, but actually thrive. Thank you for that." Driving home that night, Monique felt something shift inside her chest. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying suddenly felt lighter. She'd turned her pain into something useful, something that could help other people. Her story wasn't just a tragedy anymore. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of choosing yourself, to the possibility of reinvention. The following week, she received an email from a literary agent who'd been in the audience. "Have you considered writing a book? I think your story could resonate with a lot of people. I'd love to discuss representation if you're interested." A book. Monique had never imagined herself as an author, but the more she thought about it, the more the idea took hold. She had more to say than could fit in a 45-minute speech. More nuance, more detail, more hard-won wisdom about navigating betrayal and rebuilding a life. She met with the agent the following Tuesday. By Friday, they'd signed a contract. By Christmas, Monique had a book deal with a major publisher. From betrayal to breakthrough, one woman's journey through infidelity and into independence. The advance wasn't huge, but it was enough to give her financial security and validation, that her story mattered, that what she'd been through and how she'd survived it had value beyond just her own experience. As the year drew to a close, Monique found herself taking stock of everything that had changed. 12 months ago, she'd been standing in her kitchen, her heart breaking as she read messages between her husband and his mistress. She'd felt like her world was ending, like she'd never be happy again. Now she had a new apartment she loved, a career that was thriving, a book contract, and a growing sense of peace with herself. She had good friends, supportive parents, a therapist who'd helped her work through the trauma, and a future that felt full of possibility instead of predetermined. On New Year's Eve, Vivian threw a party at her place. Monique almost didn't go, worried about being the only single person in a room full of couples. But Vivian had insisted, and Monique was trying to say yes more often to things that scared her. The party was warm and loud and full of laughter. Monique found herself genuinely enjoying it, chatting with people she'd never met before, telling jokes, drinking champagne, feeling present in a way she hadn't felt in years. As midnight approached, everyone gathered to count down. Monique stood on Vivian's balcony, looking out at the city spread below them, and thought about Ramon, wondered where he was tonight, what he was doing, whether he was happy or regretful, or just numb. Then she let the thought go. He wasn't her concern anymore. His happiness or unhappiness wasn't her responsibility. She'd spent enough time thinking about him, analyzing what went wrong, trying to understand the inexplicable. It was time to focus on herself, on her own future, on the life she was building from the rubble of her marriage. 10, 9, 8, everyone chanted together. Monique closed her eyes and made a wish. Not for revenge or justice. She'd already had both of those. Not for Ramon to suffer. He was suffering plenty on his own. Not even for love or romance, though she wouldn't say no if the right person came along. 7, 6, 5. She wished for continued growth, for the courage to keep being honest, for the strength to keep choosing herself, even when it was hard. 4, 3, 2. She wished for peace, real peace, the kind that came from acceptance and forgiveness, not of Ramon, but of herself, for not seeing the signs sooner, for staying too long, for all the small ways she'd betrayed herself before he ever betrayed her. 1. Happy New Year! Fireworks exploded across the city skyline, brilliant bursts of color against the dark sky. Around her, people were kissing and hugging and celebrating. Vivian found her on the balcony and pulled her into a tight embrace. "Happy New Year, my fierce, incredible friend," Vivian said. "This is going to be your year. I can feel it." "It already is," Monique replied, and meant it. She stayed at the party for another hour, then headed home to her quiet apartment. As she unlocked her door and stepped inside, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for what she'd been through exactly, but for what she'd discovered about herself in the process of surviving it. She was stronger than she'd known, braver than she'd believed, more capable of starting over than she'd ever imagined. Her phone buzzed with a text, an unknown number. For a second, her stomach clenched, wondering if it was Ramon again. But when she opened it, she saw it was from someone who'd been at her conference presentation. "I just wanted to thank you again for sharing your story. I filed for divorce today. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but your words gave me the courage I needed. You showed me that there's life after betrayal, that I don't have to stay stuck in something that's killing me. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. You probably saved my life." Monique read the message 3 times, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't sad tears. They were tears of gratitude and purpose, and the profound realization that her pain hadn't been pointless. It had been transformed into something that could help others, could light the way for women who were still lost in the dark. She typed back, "You did the hardest part yourself. I just reminded you that you could. Be proud of yourself. The road ahead isn't easy, but I promise you, it's worth it." Seat. She set her phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights sparkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Ramon was probably ringing in the new year alone, maybe with regrets, maybe with acceptance, maybe with nothing at all. And somewhere out there, Riley was probably doing the same, living with the consequences of choices made in thoughtless passion. But Monique wasn't thinking about either of them anymore. She was thinking about the book she was writing, the presentations she was giving, the women she was helping. She was thinking about the promotion she'd earned, the apartment she loved, the life she was creating on her own terms. The price of betrayal had been high. It had cost her a marriage, 6 years of her life, and countless nights of tears and rage and grief. But in paying that price, she'd bought something precious: her self-respect, her independence, her understanding of her own worth. And that, she realized, was priceless. Monique Stevenson, 39 years old, divorced, author, speaker, senior director at a marketing firm, and most importantly, herself. Not someone's wife, not someone's victim, just herself, whole and complete and free. The betrayal had been devastating. The consequences had been brutal. But the cost had been paid in full by those who chose to betray, not by the one who was betrayed. And that made all the difference. She smiled at her reflection in the window, raised an imaginary glass in a toast to herself, and whispered into the quiet of her apartment, "Happy New Year, Monique. Welcome to the rest of your life." Outside, fireworks continued to light up the sky, each explosion a burst of light pushing back the darkness. And inside her small apartment, Monique felt something similar happening in her chest. Light pushing back darkness. Hope replacing despair. A future full of possibility replacing a past full of pain. She had survived the worst thing that had ever happened to her. And in surviving, she'd discovered that she was capable of more than just enduring. She was capable of thriving. The story of her marriage was over, but the story of her life was just beginning. And this time, she was writing it herself. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.